What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, joined by my guy Morgan here. Morgan, it's been a little bit since we were last both on the channel together, but we're back to do the last part of our grading series. Again, we've already graded the coaching staff, we've graded the offense. Now we're getting to the defense. And being fully transparent with you, man, I feel like there's a couple of different ways we have to look at this defense. There's a very high level view where we can take a look at what this defense did on the field in different phases of the game, like, against the run and against the pass. But then once you kind of start getting a little more granular, getting down to the nitty gritty of certain position groups and even certain players, I do think that grade starts to shift a little bit. So I don't know how you're feeling, but I think if we try to take a look at this defense from two different angles, we can grade it again from that high level perspective, and then also give the audience like our honest opinions of just like, this is how certain position groups performed, and then kind of just go from there.
Yeah, man, it sounds good. It's going to be a nuanced conversation because obviously, if you're looking at it just from like a box score view, right, you're going to be like, "Oh, the Lions' defense is why they didn't win the Super Bowl." And while that might be correct in theory,
Mm-hmm.
it's not. It's not, as we know, it's not as black and white as that. So I'm excited to get into this because there's a lot of points to be made and a lot of things to discuss from a season that it got better, right? And I'm excited to get into that.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest takeaway that I have when looking at this defense is that, like you're saying, box score wise, even if you're looking at certain rankings, they're not. It's not really impressive. But when again you go back and you reminisce on watching these games, the defense is a big part, especially later in the season, of why they were able to come out on top of some of these games. So first and foremost, like I said, let's start with that high level view. And so the area where I think this defense was at its best, literally from beginning to end, was run defense. It's clear and obvious that Aaron Glenn went into this season with his defensive coaching staff, with his players, and basically decided to build a defensive mentality around not allowing teams to run all over them. I said this during the playoffs, and I'm going to say it again here. The Lions didn't allow a single running back to run over 100 yards by themselves. They may have given up 100 yards in a game, but single player didn't happen all year. And that's a huge improvement from what this team was the previous season, Morgan.
Yeah, and they were first overall in run defense, DVOA, 18th in pass. It was awesome. They committed the resources to stopping the run. They were like, hey, we're not gonna. That's one thing. There's no one's gonna run, and so
Yeah.
everything built off of that because they wanted to get you into favorable downs and distances, and if they could do that, then they had an opportunity to get off the field because they knew they were shorthanded on against the pass. Gardner Johnson missed a big chunk of the season. You paid him good money. Emmanuel Mosley, I want to say it was 4 snaps, and that was the plan for cornerback one was Emmanuel Mosley once he got healthy, and that was the plan. He was that guy, and there was a reason he was a sought after guy coming out of San Francisco, right? Because had he not gotten hurt the year before, he would have probably been due for a really nice payday from somebody. So yeah, I give them credit to self awareness, right? Like they're like, all right, we got to stop the run because other stuff's going to be tough. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, they basically gave themselves a fighting chance in a lot of these games because, again, if you're keeping teams in second and third and long situations, again, like you said, a passing defense that was struggling at least has a better chance of getting off the field. I know you want to give a lot of credit to Aaron Glenn, who got really creative, especially late in the season with some of his blitz packages and things like that to help this defense get off the field when you knew you were a little susceptible at both corner and sometimes even at safety, depending on certain matchups.
yeah. And they got really creative down the stretch because they're like, holy crap, we got to create some pressure. Teams were taking away Aiden Hutchinson, sliding protection, chipping him, you name it. They were slowing him down. He was still being effective, but they didn't have many guys who could really threaten and win quick in one-on-ones, as we know, and we're going to get into this offseason. But yeah, they did. They got creative. He started using Ifatu Melifonwu, Brian Branch in different ways. Gardner Johnson at times when he came back healthy. So Yeah, I give credit to Aaron Glenn, and I'm excited to get into it here. We're going to start with D line, you said?
Yeah. Well, before we get there, what would you give your grades for both the passing game and the run game? Like, just
Oh,
looking back on the season, how would you kind of just grade those two, phases of the game out?
no, run defense, you got to give them an A.
Yeah.
You know, that's a given. They did a good job, man. Like from the D line to the corners, right? Like everyone is committed to stopping the run. Say what you will about Cam Sutton, Kendall Vildor, Jerry Jacobs, everyone else. They tackle and they want to they throw their weight around and they get in on the run fits, and because that's what a lot of teams try to do. They try to put your defensive backs, insert them into the run fit and see if they're about that life, see if they want to fit. And yeah, I give them credit because that's where everything started. And then for me, against the pass, I don't even know, man. Probably a D,
Yeah.
solid D.
I was a little bit nicer on the pass defense. I would give them like a C minus. And it's literally because of like there's certain things that they did do well in pass defense. Like I said, getting creative with the blitz packages, you got a lot of help from those secondary players. I mean, if Ifeatu Melifonwu is tied for third on the team with 3 sacks, right? Kirby Joseph still picked up 4 interceptions. Brian Branch, as a rookie, picked up 3. Jerry Jacobs somehow got 3 interceptions. I know he got like a nice little stretch at one point in time
Oh
where
yeah.
he had like back to back games with interceptions. So like I do think they were impactful at times in the passing game. It just wasn't consistent. But with the run game, by far, I'm in full agreement with you. It's an A all day for that group.
Yep, and that checks out when you see how they're built and what they were working with as injuries took their toll. So yeah, it makes. I'm not surprised, right? Like I think a lot of people are going to agree with us. Maybe some be a little bit more harsh
Yeah,
than
I mean, I
others,
know
but
people are going to be very harsh on the pass game, and I get it, but that's where we have to start getting into the position groups, kind of like you were talking about. And let's start up front first with the defensive line. That's a group that I think we talked about this. I believe when we were talking about the offense, we were talking about wide receiver, right? Where it feels really heavy up top, right? It's really top heavy because of the likes of an Amon-Ra St. Brown and a Sam Laporta. The same thing is very true with this defensive line. You have Aiden Hutchinson and Aleem McNeil as your top performers on this defensive line, and then it's the others. And for me, that makes it hard to give that group as a whole an A, but I also can't give them like a D or a C either. So for me, it's kind of in that B minus group because I do think Hutch and Aleem were that good, especially Aleem making a huge jump, after being in the league for his first 2 years. I think he made a huge jump this upcoming season or this past season. But I do think they kind of didn't get the necessary like improvements from other players on that defensive line.
yeah, great point about Aleem too, Miko. Because if McNeil was healthy all year, I really do think like he could have turned in a pretty special season. Because when he was healthy and clicking, man, he was making a lot of plays, and a lot of plays that don't necessarily reflect in the box score, right? Like you got to watch the tape, but I'm going to be in agreement with you here, B minus, and it's definitely buoyed by the play of Hutch and Aleem, and hopefully they can get some, guys like Josh Pascal. We talked about it before we hopped on, but if Josh Pascal could take a Derek Barnes like leap
Mm-hmm.
headed into his third year, we'd be cooking because Josh Pascal flashed a couple times this year, and he has the ability to play, on the edge. He can slide inside and hold up against, the run and, anchor well. So I really like Josh Pascal, and I think hopefully, some of these coaching changes and a little shakeup, hopefully that they can get some improvement going into next year out of guys like him.
Yeah, I think Pascal is a really good person to kind of highlight again going forward as someone who could probably make that type of jump in their play. Because I think when you look at other players on the defensive line, I think John Kaminsky kind of came back down to earth a little bit. I think what we saw this past season is a little more realistic of what to expect from him throughout a season. I think the same thing is true for Benito Jones. I don't think Benito was bad by any stretch, but I just don't think he was nearly as impactful as he was a season ago. Obviously, Levi was obviously just like getting his legs back under him, and just him being healthy for a good portion of the season. He was also has a couple healthy scratches, so there's I do think there's some potential in this defensive line, but this is one of those groups that I think we're going to see a lot of fans clamoring about when we start getting into free agency and we start getting closer to the draft. Like that's one position group, defensive tackle and an edge opposite Hutch, that you're going to see a lot of people talk about.
Yeah, and deservedly so, because it's somewhere they definitely need to get better at. And if you can start creating pressure with just, 4 or 5 pass rushers, that's where you can really start to help your back end too, on top of just getting reinforcements back there, right? Just adding to the talent pool. I would love if the Lions could start to manufacture and create pressures with 4 rushers next year. It would go a long way in being able to slow down an offense like San Francisco's, like in the second half of the NFC Championship, right? Like they
Yeah.
just couldn't create pressure unless they were just throwing everything at Purdy, and yeah. So yeah, I'm with you, Miko. That's definitely an area of need, and that's going to be something we have a lot of content, coming up on. Is that subject for sure?
Yeah. And so defensive line, you and I are both in agreement with a B minus. I want to move to the secondary now because when I talk about the secondary, I specifically mean the corners because I want to separate the corners and the safeties because the safeties don't deserve what we're about to talk about when we talk about the corners. And listen, just being honest, being straightforward, it wasn't what we expected it to be. You already kind of highlighted earlier, with Emmanuel Mosley being hurt after only a couple plays, coming off that ACL injury. I don't think we ever got to see what the secondary was supposed to be when we're looking at corners, but it says something when your best corner is your nickel corner and your nickel corner is a rookie. That doesn't usually bode well for the rest of your secondary, does it, Morgan?
No, and it was a for the corners, it was just a death by 1,000 cuts for them, unfortunately, right? Like we talked about it before just a second ago, but like they signed Cam Sutton, they paid him, I think it was 3 years for 33 mil, so it's like 11 annually if you just want to break it. That's not how contracts work, as we know, but that's not cornerback one money. That's like, you're a solid veteran, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
be good for us, but you're not. So I think that's where people they're like, oh my God, Cam Sutton. But stop and think, right? Like that's why they gave Manuel Mosley that deal, right? Like it was, that's not what Cam Sutton wasn't supposed to be traveling with CD Lamb and Puka Nakua and Justin Jefferson. Like that's not his
Yeah.
game. It's very, let's get it straight too. That's not many people's game, right? Like
Yeah, a
those
lot of
guys
people are going
are,
to struggle in those matchups.
yeah, like unless you're, Jalen Ramsey's even getting a little long in the tooth, right? Or Sauce, right? And there's not many Sauce Gardners walking around. So there's my rant there. Cam's, I expect a better year with Cam next year when he's hopefully not cornerback one. And then, yeah, it was just Jerry started the season, as we know. It wasn't working well. They made a change. I will give the staff the credit. They make changes both personnel wise and schematic wise. So then they, started rolling with Kendall Vildor. And we know how that went. I give him credit. He came off the couch, man. He was on the couch till week 10, guys. Like, what do we? You know what I'm saying, Miko?
Like, yeah, dude was competing. Like we talked about it on a lot of these games where like you break down film of Kendall Vildor and it's like, he's right there, right? And it's like really good
It's the
throws and
NFL.
bad luck.
Yeah, like the touchdown for the Stafford throw against the Rams. That was just, he gambled and lost. Like he almost had a pick. I give him credit, at least making.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one, obviously we talked, the ball bounced off his face in the championship. That's just an unfortunate, like, probably doesn't happen if you run that play in a simulation 50 times. Like that's probably the one time that happens. So yeah, it was bad. I got to give them a D plus. Brian Branch brings that up a lot. I think Brian Branch and the kid from Kansas City, McDuffie. I think those are going to be your future all pros at the nickel position for the foreseeable future. Both them
Yeah.
dudes can play. So yeah, this is another one going into the offseason. People are going to be pounding the table for the Lions to add talent in the D line room, and then also in the corners specifically.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you with the D plus, and I think again, the only reason it's not an F is because of Brian Branch. I think he was that dynamic this season, and I'm right there with you. I think he has All Pro written on him already. I think he's going to be that dynamic for this team, and I think they do. They got to figure out what to do with their cornerback situation. We'll see if they decide to again roll the dice again on Emmanuel Mosley coming off of a second ACL, injury. It doesn't seem likely, but I mean, again, we'll see. The Lions have never shied away from again taking gambles that seem to have nothing but upside for them. Um, but I also want to highlight this too as well, Morgan, before we switch gears and go over to the safeties. I think it also does say something about the type of coaching that group was getting when the Lions are seemingly right. I mean, I guess it hasn't been necessarily made official, but based off of what we can tell from like their website, Dre Bly is no longer listed as one of their secondary coaches. So something to kind of keep an eye on. Again, it's not necessarily an excuse, but you do have to wonder and at least start to contemplate like what type of coaching situation they're looking for to get the best out of their corners.
Yeah, and you give credit to Dan Campbell and the this regime, right? Because they are not scared to make changes. Like I'm sure Dre Bly is a great guy. He's one of my. If you talk to 12-year-old Morgan, 12-year-old Morgan loved Dre Bly. All right,
Mm-hmm.
now he coming out of North Carolina, but yeah, it wasn't working, and they made it. They're making changes seemingly, so something to keep an eye on. And it's a room that's probably going to like this is going to get an overhaul. Very close to what the linebackers, which we're going to get into in a minute, but it's gonna. I feel like the corners is going to get a complete like it might just be Mosley and Brian Branch and like a few others, and there's going to be a lot of new faces next year, which you need.
Yeah, 100%. So now let's move over to the safeties because, like I said, I want to have a different conversation about this group because I do think there was a lot to like from this group. Even though I'll start it off right now, I wasn't the happiest with Kirby Joseph throughout the season. I do think I think Kirby took a step back in just his consistency, not necessarily in his efficiency, but like in his ability to make plays. It's just I don't think he was making plays nearly as consistently as he was his rookie season. But then you get Ifatu Melifonwu, starting games in place of Tracy Walker, who eventually gets benched. And if he hits the ground running, and much like how for you and I, like Brian Branch really pulls up the grade for the corners, I think if he does the same thing for the safeties, where I think the safeties probably would have been like somewhere around a B minus for me. I'm gonna give them a solid B. Just looking at how they performed as a group, I do understand that Tracy Walker getting benched and essentially being released, just the other day ago, isn't a good reflection of the group. But I think when you look at how impactful Iffy was, right? Like not even just like it wasn't just like a couple games here and there. It was like the minute he got his opportunity, he started looking like one of the better safeties in the league. Like that's how dynamic he was. And I think Kirby was able to kind of get back to doing some of the things that he does well. Um, I still would like to see him get a little bit better with tackling, but that could also be said for a lot of the players on this defense. Um, and they eventually got CJ back, and I thought CJ, while didn't have his best game against San Francisco, in the games that he was available, showed why he was worth that investment. And you and I have already had that conversation about whether or not the Lions should consider bringing him back. I would say that that becomes an even bigger need now that you've moved on from Tracy Walker. But I think you take all that into consideration. I think you get a solid B out of that group.
I'm with you, man, on all the points. I'm gonna give him a B plus. I just loved Ifatu Melifonwu was maybe the third best player on defense for the Lions down the stretch, man, behind Hutch and Brian Branch. Like you could make a case like Aline was right there too, but Iffy was just such a playmaker, man. Just doing the like making big tackles down near the line of scrimmage, picking balls off, getting PBUs, man. I'm bullish on his future. I hope he can stay healthy all of next year too. Knock on wood. And then, yeah, to your point, like GJ didn't have his best year, but he was also, he came back from the torn pec super fast. Poor Tracy, I love Tracy Walker. He's one of my favorite players from that regime, really.
Yeah.
And he signed that big deal right when Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell got here, if you remember, and then shortly thereafter, ruptured his Achilles. And yeah, that was just a financial decision for those who aren't aware. Like his cap hit in 2024 was like over 12 million. So you couldn't have that for someone who was a healthy scratch in the playoffs down the stretch. So I hope Tracy lands somewhere where he can get some more, playing time. Because to your point, Miko, this is a young developing safety room. I have faith in Kirby. I think it was a sophomore slump, obviously, but I do think some of his stuff was he was trying to make too many plays because he knew
Yeah.
stuff was messed up. So to put it eloquently, on the back end, like you would see him get up sometimes, and he would have his hands thrown up because someone wasn't where. I think Kirby's a very smart player. You can
Mm-hmm.
hear when he talks like about the game, but I do think he was trying to play a little bit too much hero ball, and it got him into some trouble. And you would hear Dan Campbell talk about it a little bit in coach speak. He's like, we just need everyone to do their job,
Yeah.
not try to make a play out of structure or blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I think Kirby will bounce back big on Iffy. I know we had the video about CJ GJ. Yeah, I'm excited to roll with, if we get a full year with Kirby and Iffy, I would like that. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think if you can get a full year of that, I think if they bring back CJ GJ, I think they found a really good way of utilizing all three safeties. So I think if they do decide to bring back CJ, I think you can find a really easy way of keeping all three guys on the field. If
Yeah.
I'm also, and I said this on Twitter, someone laughed at it, but I stand by it. I think if you bring back CJ, I think it's also a really strong possibility that CJ beats Kirby out. I think because I just think, and it's more so not have to do with Kirby, but as much to do with how much I think Iffy has improved at safety. Like Iffy looks like a natural in all
Yeah.
aspects of playing safety. Like it's not just coverage, it's run defense, it's getting to the quarterback. Like he does a lot of things really well, and I think Kirby's a great center field, free safety. I think he does that really well. I think if you gave if you had an equal playing field between the three of those, I just think CJ would come out on top. So we'll see what the
Yeah.
Lions decide to do in the offseason. But even if they don't bring back CJ, I'm with you. I think it's a really solid group to have. Just Kirby and Iffy manning the safety positions.
For sure. And I don't know why anyone laughed at that point because the Lions have said many times, like, it's just a competition, man. So if they do bring Gardner Johnson back, you better believe that they'll tell them, like, yeah, the best two are going to start. They'll still play. That third safety will still get a lot of burn.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, that's not a stupid point at all. I'm right there with you.
All right, so we've covered the safeties. Let's move over to what I would say was the best group on this defense. And Morgan, it's kind of surprising to say that because going into this season, I would have expected this to be probably maybe not necessarily the worst, but not clearly not the best. I think the linebacker group was by far the best, most consistent group for this defense beginning to end. And that's every player in that linebacker group. Alex Anzalone, Derek Barnes, Jack Campbell, Germ, Rodrigo, like everyone that got to play linebacker for the Lions played it at a high level. And I don't think if we're talking about weaknesses of the defense, that group immediately gets to excuse themselves from the conversation.
Yeah, I'm right. I give them an A. Shout out Kelvin Shepard, the Lions linebacker coach. I saw him at a Pistons game like about a month or two ago. And I remember I just like hit him with like Coach Shep, and he like started laughing. But man, yeah, like Alex Anzalone playing the best ball of his professional career. Derek Barnes, we already talked about it, making the Josh Pascal point, like had a great year. Made the biggest play of the season in the divisional round to seal the game. I'll never forget that. So really like Derek Barnes going into the final year of his contract in 2024. Rodrigo is an ace on special teams, made plays when he got plays, got snaps on defense. Germ, special teams, was he an all pro?
Yeah, special teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, all pro.
First team all pro, playing and then started getting snaps towards the end of the season, especially in coverage situations. And then Jack Campbell only got better as the season went on. And to Jack's credit, because the Lions couldn't get that Sam position worked out, that Sam linebacker. So you have Hutch playing with his hand in the dirt most of the time, and then the Sam. And, they tried Charles Harris. It didn't work. Julian Okwara didn't work. So they were like, okay, we're going to start using Barnes and Campbell, and they did it. And that's not something Campbell has a lot of experience of. He's a traditional off-ball linebacker. So you give him credit, and it's all I give a ton of respect to Kelvin Shepard. And I hope he's on the fast track to becoming a coordinator and a head coach in this league because he deserves it. I think he really does. And yeah, got to give him an A. And yeah, if you'd have told me in 2021, they're like, hey, going into 2024, linebackers are gonna be one of the deepest areas of that roster. I'd be like, for real, you know?
Yeah, yeah, because they're
Yeah,
like that now, right? Like,
yeah,
and I think you have three guys at the top with Alex, Jack, and Derek Barnes that literally can like interchange their roles. Any of them can be the mic. Any of them can make the calls. They all, I think, I think they all run and hit well, right? I still think Jack is probably the better coverage guy out of them. I know Derek
yeah.
Barnes had like the interception, but I just think like long term, as Jack starts to develop, he'll prove to be the better coverage linebacker of them. But it's a group that you feel really good about, and you made this point when you and I were talking off camera. When you talk about a guy like Malcolm Rodriguez who was starting a year ago, like Malcolm would start for a lot of bad teams out there, like teams that have
Mhm.
questions at their linebacker spot. Malcolm would immediately slide in and take a starting spot. And to now have him as a depth piece, somebody that, when a Derek Barnes walks off with a stinger, can come in there, make some plays, not be a liability, is huge for you. To have a veteran like Germ, who initially a lot of people look at as like, oh, that's just special teams captain. Like, no, Germ can still play high level linebacker play on key downs. Like, we're talking third down situations. Gotta have it where teams are usually looking to point out your linebacker and exploit them. Germ is a guy that's making calls and making plays. Um, I feel really good about this group, and I'm right there with you. Kelvin Shepard deserves so much credit for how he's helped this group develop to what they were. This was a young group. It still is a really young group, but with German and Anzalone being, the veteran guys, these younger guys are getting a lot of great experience, and I feel really good about the Lions linebacker core going forward.
Me too, man. Yeah, for sure. Like, and Jalen Reeves-Maybin I would love to have him here long term too, because people talk up and down about the Lions culture. Like, that's a tone setter, right? Like,
Yeah,
for the special teams room, just how he carries himself. Like, he's one of those guys who's gonna have a good long career in the NFL because of, he can make plays on defense, and again, like Malcolm, not going to be a liability if he needs to step in there. And then special teams, he's just a dog, like in every phase. Like, he threw passes this year. So yeah, man, shout out Germ. I would love if it's low key one of my favorite lines.
yeah, and I'm right there with you. I hope the Lions do find a way of retaining him
Yeah,
once free agency kind of kicks off. Which, like you said earlier, that's some of the stuff that we're going to be getting into a little bit more over the next couple weeks over here on the Pride Detroit YouTube channel. Between the draft, free agency, there's a lot of stuff that's going to be coming up soon, and we're going to be trying to talk about all of it over the next couple weeks. So, with that said, we want to hear from you guys in the comment section. You guys have heard the grades that we've handed out for the defense. A+ for the run defense. It's a D plus, D-ish area or C- area for the pass defense. And you guys heard all the grades for the position groups. But we want to hear from you. Let us know in the comment section below. How would you grade this defense? Which groups do you think were the best? Which groups do you think struggled the most? And what do you think the Lions need to do going into the offseason to really fix this defense and to have it to be one of the better strengths of this team and not rely so heavily on a high powered offense? Also, be sure to check out pridedetroit.com, because as much as we're going to be trying to make videos about everything happening, in the NFL, the website is always going to have content. The guys that write over there are nonstop. So there's always going to be something over on the website for you guys to read and stay in tune with what's happening between free agency, the draft, and so on and so forth. But be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That way you can be notified anytime we upload new videos or decide to go live over here on YouTube. So, with that said, I'm Meko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we will catch you in the next one.